Hi everyone, this is Kelly. I work at IHE Delft as a project coordinator. In the last 3 years, I've been mostly involved in water allocation planning activities in the Mara River Basin. Our project there is aimed at improving water safety and security to support both socio-economic development and environmental protection. As part of the development of the water allocation plan for the basin, we did an environmental flow assessment to estimate the water needs of the ecosystem. In this lecture, I'll present the situation analysis we did at the beginning of this assessment. By the way, I challenge you to find out what fish species I'm holding in this picture. It was collected in the Sand River, one of the tributaries of the Mara. So, the Mara River is a transboundary river, 395 km long, shared between Kenya and Tanzania. Since the 1960s, the basin has been experiencing increasing human pressures related to population growth, deforestation, development of agriculture, urbanization, tourism, and mining. Even in the last 3 years, I've observed many changes in the basin, like new roads, towns are expanding, etc. These activities affect the quantity and quality of the river water, which can become an issue for people and the ecosystem, especially in the dry season when competing demands cannot be met and the water quality strongly deteriorates. Therefore, for the past 2 decades, multiple projects have been working towards sustainable water management. And between 2007 and 2012, a first environmental flow assessment was undertaken at 5 points along the river. Our aim was to improve the existing environmental flow recommendations and integrate them into the water allocation plan. The V-steep approach helped establish the full scope of the situation analysis and main variables to examine. It helped us identify where information was lacking and where we needed to put special attention. For example, limited information was available on the values of the different communities in the basin. Therefore, later in the EFA process, an MSc students spent a couple of months in the field and used a questionnaire survey to collect information on people's needs in different parts of the catchment. And that varied between sub-basins. Likewise, we learned that our main implementation partner, the Water Resource Authority in Kenya, needed technical capacity development related to e-flow assessment. These trainings were arranged and carried out. I won't go into the details of each variables we looked into, but this approach was helpful in noting different variables that needed to be considered in the analysis. Another tool we used to analyze the situation was the DPSIR approach, to identify variables, both flow and non-flow related, that were affecting the ecosystem, ecosystem services, human health, and socio-economic development. We developed this in cooperation with Basin stakeholders. It looks a bit messy with all the arrows, but it reflects the multiple connections between different levels in the DPSIR model. For our purposes, it was important to note that not only increased water demand affects the river flows, but also land use activities like grazing, indirectly by affecting surface runoff. To understand the social, economic, and political setting in the basin, we did a literature review using different sources of information, including news articles, reports from various organizations, population censuses, scientific articles, and GIS information available from global and local databases. As you can see on the map, the Mara River Basin is part of the Lake Victoria Basin, which is part of the larger Nile River Basin. We calculated that about 1.1 million inhabitants live within the basin, 65% of them in Kenya and 35% in Tanzania. Various communities occur in the basin, namely the Maasai, Kalenjin, and Kuria people, which have significantly different lifestyles and cultures, including the ways they rely on the water and its resources. Stakeholder mapping required identifying what organizations in Kenya and Tanzania have a dependency on or interest in the water resource. Originally, it helped us identify the Water Resource Authority in Kenya as a key stakeholder for the implementation and institutionalization of e-flows in Kenya, where our efforts were focused, and the Lake Victoria Basin Commission (LVBC) and the Nile Basin Initiative (NBI) were identified as key players in the extension of our assessment into Tanzania and in the development of transboundary collaboration. The water users identified were invited to form a working group that would collaborate with the Water Resource Authority in the development of the water allocation plan. Assessing the situation in the Mara also included studying the policies and legislation related to water allocation and e-flows. Environmental flows are referred to as the reserve in Kenya and Tanzania, defined in the water laws of both countries as, quote, the quantity and quality of water required, A, to satisfy basic human needs for all people who are or may be supplied from the water resource, and B, to protect aquatic ecosystems in order to secure ecologically sustainable development and use of the water resource. Remember that you learned about the reserve approach in Unit 1. In September 2015, the Republic of Kenya and the United Republic of Tanzania signed a Memorandum of Understanding for joint water resources management of the transboundary Mara River. Since then, 3 joint management committees have been established to facilitate the implementation of the MOU. We also looked into the vision or objectives that were already set for the basin. In Kenya, the catchment management strategy calls for an equitable, efficient, and sustainable use of water for the benefit of all. Now, that may sound a little bit general, but the Water Resource Authority also set resource quality objectives, or QOs, for the Kenyan part of the basin. The classification includes 3 main parameters: ecological, livelihood, and commercial uses of the resources. Overall, the Water Resource Authority highlighted that water needs for the ecosystem should be prioritized within the Mara River Basin. Other visions included to, quote, maintain people living in harmony with nature while achieving human well-being and sustainable economic development in perpetuity, and, quote, preserve a region rich in biodiversity which benefits the present and future generations and ecosystem functions. We also looked in more detail at the hydrology, geomorphology, and ecology of the Mara River. To do that, we compiled all the data available from historical records and scientific articles. As much as possible, we used GIS and also more illustrative ways to map the variability and diversity occurring in the basin between the different tributaries. In terms of hydrology, we learned that the basin consists of both perennial and ephemeral rivers. The upper tributaries, Nyangores and Amala, are the perennial source of the Mara River, occurring at high elevations, whereas the tributaries of the middle and lower basin, like the Talek, the Sand, and Tigit, are seasonal and more flashy systems. The Mara wetland downstream in Tanzania is a large papyrus wetland that grows and shrinks from season to season depending on inflows from the river. By the way, this wetland is also very important to the livelihoods of people living around it. Historical photos and books were used to help us understand the past and present state of water resources in the basin. In terms of vegetation, land use, and geomorphology, we learned that forests originally covered the headwater areas, while shrub and grasslands dominated middle and lower parts of the basin. Today, a sizable portion of the basin has become converted to agriculture, including areas of large-scale irrigation near the confluence of the Nyangores and Amala tributaries. Geomorphologically, the river has a very active sediment regime that produces a number of ecologically important features in the river. Land use change has increased erosion in the basin, which alters the sediment regime. This is something we must pay close attention to in our assessment. We also looked at the ecology of the Mara River. We especially tried to identify indicators of water quantity and quality that could be used in our environmental flow assessment. The Mara River and its tributaries offer a diversity of habitats for fish and invertebrate species, some of them being highly flow sensitive. The mainstem Mara River hosts large mammal and reptile species like hippopotamus and crocodiles. The ephemeral tributaries act as seasonal refuges, rich in nutrients and organic matter. The Masai Mara National Reserve and Serengeti National Park and the Mara wetland are biodiversity conservation hotspots. Planned developments in the basin include 3 major dams, an interbasin transfer, and irrigation projects in Tanzania and Kenya. Land use change is expected to continue with urbanization and agricultural development. The environmental flow assessment and water allocation plan should include a section on scenario analysis to assess the potential impact of these developments on the water resources, ecosystems, and ecosystem services. So, this slide marks the end of this lecture, and the main take-home messages are: the Mara River Basin situation analysis helped to identify the main drivers and pressures, including flow-related pressures, influencing the status of water resources, ecosystems, and related human uses. It helped our team to identify key stakeholders and implementation partners and embed our work in the national and regional governance systems. It also helped identify the biodiversity and ecological priorities for protection in the basin and the interaction of these with wider basin characteristics. Thanks to the situation analysis, our team was able to design an e-flow assessment that fully considered the basin context and involved the right partners.